So Angelo Soliman was a freed slave who rose through the highest ranks of Viennese society. The portrait of Angelo Soliman was a mezzotint made by the German artist Johann Haid in the 1760s off of a lost portrait by another German artist called Johann Steiner. And centered in the image is this sort of very dark-skinned man wearing, I guess, what we would consider the dress of the upper classes of Austria. And his hand is tucked into the top of that suit in a very powerful pose. And in his hand, he is supporting or carrying a cane, which is topped with a very kind of ferocious-looking golden lion. You know, what most strikes you about this image is that he's wearing on his head a kind of, beautifully wound, pristine white turban. And beneath this, you notice that his gaze is just filled with such clarity and light. And he has a very intelligent face and a very proud look on his face. He's really a very dignified figure. They think his name was originally Mamade Make, and that he was taken from Borno State, which is located in current day or modern day Nigeria, and taken through the port of Messina, eventually ended up in France, where he lived in the household of a woman, a marquesa, who saw fit to educate him, and then eventually presented him as a gift to the Prince of Liechtenstein. Solomon eventually ended up living in Vienna with his master, and it was there that he kind of started his trajectory moving through the upper echelons of Viennese society. He was a polyglot. He was a polymath. He was a very intelligent man. Eventually ended up playing chess with the emperor, and he also joined this Masonic lodge to which Mozart was said to belong, and it was said that the two of them met often at this lodge. And his position at that point would seem to suggest that he was very much entrenched within his culture and very much a part of his culture. There were very few people who were of his like and able to navigate that, through that society with the ease that he did. And so he was very exceptional, I think, for his time. Angelo Soliman passed away in 1796, and it was thought that he died of either a stroke or a heart attack. And instead of a Christian burial, which would have been the expectation, and it was decided that he should be made into a piece of taxidermy. So he was stuffed and dressed in very exotic clothing and strung with beads, and then put on display in the kind of cabinet of curiosities at the Natural History Museum in Vienna, amongst wildlife like capybara and marsh birds and all of this. So this was a man who would certainly have felt at the time a sense that he had, in the end, he was living a life beyond race, that he hadn't been reduced to stereotypes or prejudices of what blackness was, which was mostly an idea that was tied to slavery. So he, I presume, would have felt that he had, shattered that barrier. But in the end, his burial, which is so shocking and so horrifying and so, just so objectifying and so just disgusting, really, tells us that, he hadn't quite, this was not something that had been fully realized. He was still seen to be an object